Well, we certainly have heard and maybe even been worried or concerned about stories involving lead. Certainly the Flint water situation has thrust the lead issue into the spotlight. And tomorrow in Battle Creek, a lead awareness event, and we'll be giving you some details on that, an educational event, certainly, and a number of folks here to talk about that. It's a collaborative effort between Calhoun County, Battle Creek, Albion, and others. Calhoun County's Chief Health Officer, Jim Rutherford, is here this morning. Hi, Jim.
Good morning.
Also here today, Sheryl Mitchell. She's the city manager in Albion. Hi, Sheryl.
Good morning.
And Helen Guzzo is here, too, from the Battle Creek City offices, Community Development Specialist. Good morning, Helen.
Good morning.
Well, thanks to everybody for being here today. Let's just, before we go any further, talk about what you have planned tomorrow briefly, and then we'll give details at the end about where and when. What's tomorrow all about?
Tomorrow, Thursday, October 27th, from 6:30 to 8 at the Cool Family Community Center is a speaker about lead. We're going to have refreshments. The Food Bank of Southwest Michigan is going to be there giving out refreshments because healthy foods are part of protecting kids against lead. And we actually have to be flexible. Tina Reynolds is a great representative from the Michigan Environmental Council who is going to be with us, but her child plays soccer and is playing in the semifinal championship for the state final tomorrow. So Adrienne DeFord from the Ingham County Health Department, she's an expert in lead, and she's going to be our speaker.
Okay. Very good. So obviously some accommodations made for that big opportunity for Tina there. All right. But still, lots to talk about. And that's really the crux of this, Jim, isn't it? We're talking about children's exposure to lead.
We really are, and we have a very vulnerable population in our community. The most vulnerable are the 0 to 6-year-olds, and the reason that they're more vulnerable to lead is because their brain is still developing, and they're oftentimes in situations where they get more direct exposure. So obviously lead is a naturally occurring element. However, it's not found within our bodies. So when it is introduced into our system, it can be very detrimental, particularly, again, for that 0 to 6-year-old population.
Mm-hmm. Sheryl, this is a concern you share in Albion. Is that true?
Definitely. One of our main concerns is because the housing is older housing, especially in communities like Albion. So the properties that are pre-1978, when they started taking the lead out of the paint, are pretty prevalent in our communities. So we have high-risk populations just because of our housing.
Mm-hmm. And that is a sentiment shared elsewhere, too, and we'll talk about that in just a moment on WBCK. We are talking about lead today. In fact, a special lead awareness event tomorrow in Battle Creek at the Cool Family Center. If you missed those details a second ago, we'll explain coming up in just a minute. But with us today, folks from Calhoun County, City of Battle Creek, and Albion today, all concerned about this issue. Jim Rutherford, our Chief Health Officer. You were talking a little bit about lead exposure to children. Of course, this Flint thing really thrust the awareness of this, but from the water perspective, right, which generally is somewhat unusual.
Flint is something that we've been talking about for almost 2 years now, and it's been a significant issue not only at the local and state level, but obviously at the national level as well. And what's interesting is that historically, lead poisoning wasn't a result of waterborne. It's typically in our community and nationally in the state of Michigan as well. It's typically kids that are exposed through their housing environment. So houses built before 1978 oftentimes had lead in the paint. So when kids are exposed to that through either dust or paint particles, they get lead in their systems, and it can be, again, very detrimental.
And Sheryl made the point that, when you're talking about communities with older homes, the exposure through paint is certainly there. Is that our Battle Creek issue too, Helen?
Yeah, that is people fixing up their homes, which is a really good thing. They don't realize that the older homes have lead in them, and so maybe the outside of their house, they scrape it and they paint it, and it gets into the dirt, and then their kids play in that dirt, and then they bring it into the house or in the home. So it's just being aware of when you're scraping and sanding to put plastic down and to safely dispose of that. Contractors are supposed to be trained in lead awareness. I know when I bought a house that was built in 1970 in Battle Creek, the home inspector said don't plant vegetables right next to the house because of the risk of lead-based paint. And so the advice is to wash kids' hands when they come inside, to make sure all your windowsills are clean so that the dust and the chips are not there for kids to ingest. And not to let kids play in bare dirt, because lead, once it comes off the house into the dirt, it just stays there. It's a heavy lead, and it stays. So grassy areas, covering your play area with wood chips so that the kids aren't exposed. Dogs can bring in lead. If you're a muzzle loader user, the lead shot can expose your kids. If you're a fisherman, your lead sinkers. You know, those are things kids should never play with. They shouldn't touch. They just... sometimes people who are welders, they have to be very careful with the lead solder, that they're not bringing that into their homes to their kids, and people that do ceramics. So there's many different sources of lead, and the health department, if someone is lead poisoned, the health department sends out a health nurse to come educate a family about where's the lead occurring, how can you eat the proper foods, how can you reduce that lead level if you do have a lead poisoned kid. There's about... in the last 5 years, there's about 300 children that have been lead poisoned in Calhoun County.
300. My head is spinning with that list of things. Goodness, there's a lot to learn about this. Sheryl, in Albion, you're listening to these things. Is there a way that you try and disseminate this information in your city?
Well, the session that we're going to have tomorrow is one of the first key ways we're going to try to share the information. We're fortunate because of the misfortune of the city of Flint and their water situation that at least brought awareness and some questions. So we want to make clear that in Calhoun County, and in particular in the city of Battle Creek and Albion, that our water is meeting the standards in regards to the lead testing, and the copper testing is tested quarterly by the DEQ. It's the type 1 water. So we don't have an issue relative to the water that leaves our facilities and gets to the houses. Now, in regards to the residential houses, they may still have lead connections. So we do encourage residents to have their homes tested to make certain that there isn't contamination through that route. But in general, that is not where our issue lays. It really is environmental relative to the lead paint and the ground, as we were talking about. Right.
It's not a water situation. In fact, we've talked with Perry Hart many times now after the Flint situation. He's in charge of the water quality in Battle Creek and has talked to us at length about that and is quite confident about the quality of our water. So, Jim, we're back to the paint thing again. What is it about kids and lead? This is a particular concern, isn't it?
Well, again, it's just that their brains are developing, and exposure to lead can impair that development. It can lower their IQ. Oftentimes it's misdiagnosed. Kids that are labeled with attention deficit disorder may have indeed had some lead exposure at one point in time. You know, what we've done, I think, in the past has been good, but we know we need to do more. So what we're really ramping up is the number of kids that we're testing for lead. Historically, we'll test in this community probably close to 2,000 kids between the age of 0 to 6. That represents about 25% of that population, and we know we need to do much more than that. So we've worked with our partners here at the table, as well as some of the community foundations, the Albion Community Foundation, the Battle Creek Community Foundation. We've purchased some additional lead sampling analyzers. We're really going at it full speed in terms of doing additional testing. Our goal is to test every child as such several times between the ages of 0 to 6. We know that if we test probably 2,000 kids now, roughly 3 to 4% of those come back as lead burdened. That's significant. And when we talk about an average of 50 kids a year, if I'm going to quadruple the number of samples that we're doing, we're ultimately going to see 3 to 4 times more kids. So our involvement with the public health nurse and follow-up and assuring that the social services are available, because oftentimes it's an economic issue, and we have parents or a single mom that may say, you know what, I can't lose this housing situation that we have. So we need to work with the landlords. We know historically we have one house that may be responsible for many lead poisonings year after year after year. So those are situations that we deal with in the community that are important, and we really want to shine a light on them.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, and how they go about actually testing for lead among children. And in a moment, we'll give you those details, too, about that event tomorrow at the Cool Center, where you can get more info. That's coming up in just a minute. WBCK, we're here with officials from Calhoun County, City of Battle Creek, and City of Albion. A lead awareness event tomorrow, Thursday, at the Cool Family Center. And that'll be in the evening, and we'll give you these details coming up in just a second. Jim, I want to touch on something you started to talk about here, and that's testing children. First of all, if you're going to increase the number of children we test, then we imagine we're going to see more lead statistics, right?
Most definitely.
The way you approach it.
Most definitely. And right now, we, as a community, there's a lot of different opportunities for your child to be tested. Through the Community Action Agency does them between the ages of 0 to 2. We do them now in our WIC program, Women, Infant, and Children program. Primary care physicians, your family doctor can test. We want to do more in terms of educating the schools and such. We have school nurses that ultimately can be able to be able to do that testing as well.
Is that the easiest way to find all the children we need to test, is through the schools?
I think that we want to get them actually 0 to 6. We want to get them before they enter kindergarten. So that becomes a little bit more of a challenge. Right. So, reaching out to the family doctors, the pediatricians, working with programs that deal with first-time moms, first-time families. I think that's a good vehicle to be able to get to those families.
Speaking of schools, we talk about 1978. Most of our school buildings were built well before that. Is lead a concern in school buildings?
Well, through a grant from the W.K. Kellogg Foundation for the past 3 years, we've been able to do water testing in all of the schools. And while we did find some very small traces of lead, we were able to work with them to remediate the situation. So the vast majority of the schools and child care facilities, we've done a significant amount of testing and identified that that's not a real concern within our community. Again, we go back to that antiquated housing stock.
Right. And speaking of that, Helen, in Battle Creek, if someone's listening now and they know they have lead in their home or there's a possibility of it, sometimes the city can help figure this out.
The city has a minor home repair loan program which can help a family buy new windows or remediate any lead concerns. It's a loan program, but it's you can call the city at 966-3315, and Matt Flanders runs our minor home repair program and does an assessment. And if a family does have a child with a higher lead level above 5, Jim will have to say it's 5 milligrams per deciliter.
It's easier to remember as parts per million, so micrograms per deciliter.
And science class.
The state has a healthy, safe homes program that also assists families with doing any needed renovation to encapsulate or to remove the source of the lead in their home.
How about in Albion, Sheryl? If someone's listening now in Albion and says, I might have lead, I don't know, or they know they do, what do you tell them generally if you encounter them?
We would probably put them in touch with the county health department.
Okay.
There are resources from the state as well in terms of the inspections that can happen in the home, and most likely is in response to a high blood level test from a child from the 0 to 5 age. But we don't want people to be totally discouraged by having those findings because there are remedies available, including diet, in terms of increasing the amount of iron that they consume and calcium. There are remedies in terms of the home improvement and approaches to how you can do that. So the most important thing we want to emphasize right now is just the education.
All right. And that, speaking of that, is what will take place tomorrow night at the Cool Center, right, Helen? This is going to be an education event.
Yeah, at 6:30 we have a speaker, and we're going to have a panel of experts from the county, from the city, talking about what's happening here in Calhoun County, and we're going to have the food bank's going to be talking about nutritious food. So it's at 6:30 at the Cool Family Center. It's free and open to the public. We'd like to have people come out, especially mothers and fathers of young children and any healthcare providers that might want to get more information.
All right. Cool Family Center downtown, free. Doors open at 6. Seating is first come, first served, and there will be some light refreshments too. And you can learn all about this, lead poisoning and lead awareness, and how to avoid it. Thanks to all of you for your help today.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right. Helen Guzzo, Battle Creek, Sheryl Mitchell from Albion, and Jim Rutherford in Calhoun County Health Department.